With that, I am going to turn it over to Marie from Murphy Epson. Please feel free to use the chat as we proceed. Put any questions into the chat, any comments. We are taking notes and making sure that those questions will be addressed later on in the presentation. All right, over to you, Marie.
Thank you, Joyce. So we have just had a lot of engagement, and I'm just one speaker of several who are going to highlight some of the great outreach we've done. We've counted more than 5,000 engagements since April and 296 attendees at our visioning workshops in May. Maybe some of you attended. We had 116 people attend our community conversation with Mayor Bibb in July, where field operations began to unveil some pieces based on what they'd heard from the public so far. There's been more than 100 participants in Third Space Action Lab discussions, which you'll hear more about. We did 11 focus groups and 122 participated in that. On our next slide, we highlight a couple more engagements that we've had. We've had more than 1,600 worksheets submitted at community events. So we've been out going to where the people are, and we've just had a lot of great conversations there. More than 2,500 online survey respondents. And as of today, we have a new survey for you to fill out, and it's short and sweet. So if you haven't done that before, please join in and be surveyed there. And as you can tell, I'm in a room that requires motion, and I have not been moving for the last 20 minutes. So now that's why I'm in the dark. In the meantime, we've had a lot of online news coverage, and we thank our media partners who are on the line today for getting the news out about these opportunities to engage and what the development of the input has led us to. And we've had more than 1,800 social media shares of the news coverage. So we're reaching a lot of people in addition to those one-on-one conversations, but reaching the world at large through our media partners. So what have we heard? I think, Mitch, this is in a PDF, and so we can't play the video today, but this is online, and it shows 10 people who were interviewed and just really sharing their stories. And what they told us was that they want places to walk, bike, roll, explore, sit, and relax. They want community events and programs. As we talk about this master plan, these are things people want to see and do. They want affordable dining and shopping. Values that were very important to people, that space for joy and play and relaxation. They want to be able to connect people with Lake Erie. And we had an event on Friday, depending on how you pronounce it, Chaka is how we pronounce it, but we had another 250 people attend there and kind of reverse that whole thing. What can we give back to the lake? Not only the lake giving to us. People want sustainable and beautiful places with trees. So we heard a lot about that from April to July. Then we shifted into a little bit different phase because in July, field operations began to share what the preliminary concepts were. Well, since then, the findings have been that people want to dive deeper into lakeside dining, festivals, arts and cultural events. We also asked people to design porches, and Lisa's going to talk more about that, those intimate spaces in addition to the big elaborate ideas for the master plan. And so we got a lot of input on design and architecture, a lot of requests to really lean into our culture and history and to really make sure that we're using natural materials and green space. So I believe with our next slide, we'll just recap that now we're entering kind of almost that, now that we have a draft master plan that Lisa will share, we want to make sure that people have another opportunity to weigh in and let us know, are we headed the right direction? Do we need some tweaks before the whole vision is designed? So we'll be doing outreach and tabling at Dave's Markets. I mentioned the online survey. That will be open for another couple of weeks. And then there will be City Planning Commission meetings in early January, and that's when the master plan final vision will be issued, and there will also be a connector report as well. And remember, the connector is the land bridge, and that gets us to this beautiful place where the master plan is going to dig in deeper. All right, so Allison, I think you're up next.
Yes, good afternoon, or almost afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to read your associations with Lake Erie in the chat. As you'll see, we're so interested in gaining perspective about how people today connect with the lake, how they have in the past, and how you all want to in the future. So as was introduced earlier, I'm Allison Lucasy-Love with the Greater Cleveland Partnership, and it's been my absolute honor to work alongside this team as we co-create with all of you this new vision for redeveloping the downtown lakefront. You can go to the next slide, Mitch. So, not news to anyone on this call, but planning the downtown Cleveland lakefront is not new. Since the Daniel Burnham designed 1903 group plan, that was the vision for the malls. There have been 16 official and many more unofficial plans resulting in the downtown lakefront as we know it today. And Joyce described some of that both in a infrastructure perspective, but also the cultural and social barriers that have been set up as a result of those planning processes. And we know that people have been left out of the conversation, and people that are left out of those conversations around creating new infrastructure and new places and community are pushed out of the picture, both literally and metaphorically, which is why it's been this intention of the project team to surface the whole history. And that's a terminology that we've been using throughout the research phase of the master plan work. And it was something that was highlighted at the Pachachka Night Cleveland this past Friday, which you can see a recording of very shortly on our cleveland.com, or I'm sorry, clevelandnorthcoast.com website. There's also a full recording accessible in WKYC's coverage of the event on Friday. Next slide, Mitch. So to create a future space where all Clevelanders feel belonging, and you've seen a little bit of this already in the slides, it's so important for us to have this community voice continue to shape the project. We know that the land that we are talking about is native land, but today there is no physical representation of that. The land that we're talking about mostly consists of asphalt parking lots. And so it should become much more than another new development. It should be something that is really community driven. And so since May, we've been out in the community to gather stories and memories of our lakefront. And if we don't already have your story, well beyond what you have put in the chat today, we want your story, and we'll provide ways for you to continue to give that to us. Next slide. So these are some examples of some of the feedback and some of the modes of ways that people have been able to provide feedback, because we believe that the power of this master plan to really be the 17th and last plan, the last vision document that we need, because we're going to build the vision that the community co-creates in its entirety. We believe in the power of that to be a blueprint for a lakefront that reflects the diverse experiences, needs, and aspirations of our community. And really have enjoyed hearing people, verbally telling us their stories, as we did at the Pachachka Night Cleveland during the open house. Compass Consulting did some work early in the year alongside TV20. And then, we've just been out in the community, as was stated, just asking for feedback. And you can see some of the stories here on just a couple of the many, many, many hundreds and maybe thousands of Post-it notes we've collected. Next slide. So again, our philosophy on engagement, I think when it comes to these transformative large-scale infrastructure projects, is really being set with this North Coast Lakefront Plan. We've learned along the way to be creative in an approach that is at once both wide. We're trying to be citywide and get out even beyond that, further into the county and the region. So these wide, quick touch points with surveys, being at grocery stores and festivals, but also really deep with salons, focus groups, discussions with the city's Department of Aging, as well as in CMSD classrooms. We've been in middle schools and high schools. And you'll hear more about those salons in just a second. Next slide. And then, similar to what Murphy Epson was describing, I think the one thing to me personally that I have found remarkable is that across all these demographics, we've consistently seen a desire to use and access our lakefront differently. And these are some of the earlier results from the second survey around the amenities that people wanted to see. And you can see dining, festivals, arts, culture. And of course, who can turn down a sand beach, whether you're vacationing vacationing or staycationing, because we have also been very intentional about getting feedback from visitors to Cleveland as well, and what would maybe make their experience more attractive here along our lakefront. So the thing that, again, I think is notable is that youth and older adults who have illustrated some of these pictures that you see here on the screen have really shared a very similar desire just to be by the lake, to fish, to just simply find peace and relaxation while watching boats, watching the water, watching a sunset. So just these really simple desire points to just really have more association with our lakefront, as we are one of the most privatized communities along the shore of Lake Erie, and we're here to set that on a different course. And then, Mitch, the last slide here is something that may be new to many of you on the call who have maybe been watching this project. We know that infrastructure investments are not neutral. Highways, buildings, parks, our built environment, we can bolster connections and economic gains for some, but that often means that many residents are left out of that picture again, which can be inflicting deep multi-generational harms on community. And this is not a uniquely Cleveland story, unfortunately, but Cleveland is in a unique position as the first city in a beta cohort of the Full Frame Initiative, and their work puts well-being into focus. And so on this slide is just a quick capture of where we are in that beta cohort. The goal is building awareness amongst diverse communities and getting a more representative survey sample of U.S. Census data, using that data to cross-check our representation. We were able to take over 100 residents, mostly residents in Ward 5 and 14 in the city of Cleveland, on a boat ride with the Good Time at the end of September. And for some of those folks on the boat, it was their first time, or first time in a long time, having an opportunity to be on Lake Erie, and for a substantial amount of time. I think one of the things that's most notable about this work is that it's in partnership with Neighborhood Connections, and is being funded through the Gund Foundation. And those funds are going directly into the community through what we are calling credible messengers. And those are surveyors who are out in the field. They are residents. They work in Ward 5 and Ward 14 as well. And they are working with their neighbors, the community, to help us get even more data points for the lakefront. And again, with this lens of well-being and trade-offs. And it's really interesting work. And there will be a community conversation around it in November that we'll be advertising soon. And then just the last slide, and I'm sure this is not the last time you're going to see this, but these are the upcoming engagement opportunities. Of course, we're super appreciative that you took time during your day to join us. We want you to take the survey after you've seen this presentation. Please go to clevelandnorthcoast.com, take that quick survey, share your story. We always have the Connect page up on the website. Please share with us your story, your memory, or your dream, and we can and will continue to incorporate those into the design. There's some opportunity too for kids to get involved. You can download coloring pages from our website. So I think clevelandnorthcoast.com is the best way to get information as this project continues to evolve, and highly encourage you to share that with your friends, families, colleagues, as we continue to want to build awareness in the community. And without further ado, I think that next up is Third Space Action Lab to talk about the deep dive they did in their Salon series.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Allison. My name is Mordecai Cargill. I'm the co-founder and chief creative officer of Third Space Action Lab. And for some of you who know me, you know that brevity is not my ministry. So I'm going to give the highlights, but I invite you all to hit us up and engage with us further. But before I go much further into the slides, I did want to give a couple of shout outs. So first, to Dr. Tamika Taylor and Adrian Haddon from Compass Consulting. Our ability to create these intimate spaces that were not bound by time as much as they were bound by the imaginations of the people who joined us in those spaces was really set up by the incredible breadth and the ground that Compass Consulting was able to cover. I also wanted to give a shout out to my comrades, Andriana Sheriff and India Pierre Ingram, who are the co-hosts for the salon sessions. And they have put together a really beautiful textured summary, which we're happy to share with anyone who's interested in digging in further. So a bit about our summer engagement activity. So the salon is what we're going to talk about today, but we also were attempting to experiment with multiple methods and typologies for sustaining a continuous dialogue throughout the various stages of this process. And so the salon was a intentional departure from the traditional focus group, in that we were prioritizing the conversation, and we were allowing for these conversations to bleed into and to go across different phases. And so what happened is that people would come for one salon, like the whole history salon, and we would be talking about a more complete and textured history that goes beyond the founding of the city of Cleveland. We were talking about these various cultural practices that may have faded into our public memory, but are still relevant and should be unearthed today. And this conversation about the complete history would also inform our conversation about the front porch. So like, how do we make the lakefront or the downtown footprint? How do we ensure that it is not just a symbol or an aspiration, but what would it look like for you to see design elements that evoke these memories and these feelings of being safe in public? And then when we think about creating a lakefront for everyone, we know that we have to overcome some psychological as well as physical barriers that prevent people from unimpeded access to the lakefront, to the water, to the green spaces, to the amenities. These conversations are very difficult to bound within one discrete conversation about one thing. And so we were allowing for these things to kind of feed into one another and continue. So you can go on to the next slide. So we had 3 conversations, and the attendees in total for the salon series was about 33. We had some people who came back more than once. So I think most people came at least once to a salon series session, but we also created these other touch points in our regularly scheduled intergenerational lunches that are part of the Chalk City Cleveland project. We also supplemented the in-person experience with social media engagement, which was intended to be a 6-part soul check that was kind of foregrounding these provocations for people to continue self-reflection beyond just the specific prompt that we were engaging that day, but also for us to bring our lived experiences into conversation with the technical expertise that's represented on this project team. If you go on to the next slide. The lakefront for everyone, as I mentioned, this is one of the kind of overarching themes of this planning process. So the process itself was intended to not be kind of compartmentalized into this is a design step and this is an engagement step. In fact, we were able to collapse those two. And in so doing, this was a space that facilitated learning and sharing that was not necessarily connected to a individual's positional authority or their background expertise. So what I mean by that is when we were talking about the lakefront for everyone, we were talking about the downtown footprint, but we were talking about these broader ideas, like how do you get downtown? Do you feel welcome downtown if you're an East Sider? Or do you feel welcome downtown if you're a West Sider? How do we ensure that this space is representative of the many diverse cultures that are reflected in Northeast Ohio and the city of Cleveland? But also, how do we ensure that regardless of your mode of transportation, you feel like you can get there and that this is a place for you? We go on to the next slide. This is the summary of all of the, well, not all, actually, this is only a snapshot of some of the conversations that we were having. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a kind of highlight or snapshot that we can hand over to field ops as one step in this continuous conversation. And so some of these themes will be familiar to anyone who lives in Cleveland or Northeast Ohio. So, but you'll also recognize that these themes are not necessarily just specific observations or insights about the design aspect. We're talking about things that are relevant to how we as Clevelanders, people who live or work in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, how do we feel more ownership and more of a sense of belonging in downtown and particularly on the lakefront. I think this is the final slide for me. So I will pass it back to you, Marie. Thank you.
Thanks, Mordecai. And we're going to ask a poll question. So Mitch is going to pull it up here in a heartbeat. All right. So we'd like to know, is this your first exposure or not to this whole master plan? So the question is, how have you participated in the North Coast Master Plan process so far? Select all that apply. It's multiple choice, so you can do more than one if you like. And I'm going to count back from 10, and then we'll end the poll. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and end the poll. All right, so wow, great participation in our workshops. We really appreciate your participation in those. And about half of you have participated in the online survey, so it's not too late. You can do that today. You've learned information at a community event, and thanks, Mordecai, for the shout out to Compass. They played a key role in staffing those community events and going out and really having those conversations there as well. Posted on, you saw information on social media. About a quarter of you did that. Some of you have commented on the website at 7%, and I am curious what that other is. So if you responded in other, if you would post that in the chat, we'd love to know about that. So Allison, are you seeing any other chat items that you might want to respond to?
Yeah, we've got some suggestions so far. You know, we haven't dove in yet to the draft master plan, but I can quickly go through. We have a suggestion here for colored light installations along the lakefront to let everyone know, you know, Cleveland is open, the parks are open, we're open for business. There was a recommendation here to make sure that the trees and plants can be edible, so we can work towards not only being a green city on a blue lake, but an edible city as well. And then we also had a comment about rock climbing and a reference to Columbus and some of their parks along their waterfronts. And just a comment here that very rarely is the climbing wall not in use. So good comments. Continue, please, to put your comments, questions in the chat. We'll moderate them.
And Lisa, we'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, great. Gonna just have Cricut pull up. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks to all of you who have dedicated your time and energy to this. And for anyone who did have the opportunity to join on Friday night at the Rock Hall, it was a really incredible evening and sort of hearing all of these different stories was really inspiring. And, you know, the stories themselves are really foundational in not only grounding the master plan, but also bringing it to life. And that's something that we're truly interested in doing. There's only so much that a vision or a planning document can do at this stage, but I think the more and more we sort of make it personal and reflective of the wider community, the better and better it will get over time. And of course, I too wanted to just thank, of course, our team members, everyone that's already been mentioned, who are working collaboratively with, as well as my personal team, including Cricket Day, who is also on the line, and Yura Wang, as well as Cleveland-based Robert P. Madison International, who has been a partner on the project. So we wanted to share a bit of a snapshot of the latest direction on the lakefront, which of course, as Director Wong noted, is really rooted in the mayor's vision to create a place of healing with the guiding principles of racial equity, economic opportunity, and climate resiliency. And a lot of people, their first question that they ask is, how is this different from all the other previous plans? And I think it is those three values and centering those values, you know, over anything else. So we do always like to start with what we heard. And of course, you've already heard what we've heard. But I wanted to reinforce some of the things that have come out of that engagement work. I think that, of course, we've sort of seen just the numbers and the different types of engagement. So in addition to the more traditional forms of engagement, all of the other things that are sort of happening in order to sort of have the widest and the deepest reach. And of course, you know, that is coupled with, as we talked about, sort of going out into communities, meeting all of you and others where you are at festivals, at community rec centers, grocery stores, etc. And reinforcing, you know, some of the things that we've really started to hone in on are not only sort of uses or how people really want to experience the place. I think for us, it's about the experience. And people said, you know, exciting them and what would feel unique to Cleveland was really about affordable dining options and places really for the community to come together and gather. But also, we've been really focusing our work on vision and values. And so values is really important. I think the primary visioning was really around expressing a strong desire to really balance three primary things, nature and green spaces. And this was articulated as places to really relax, for refuge, you know, for sort of quiet, as well as access to the water. And this too was articulated as a richer thing having to do with different ways to engage the water. So some people wanted to engage the water by viewing it. Some people wanted to boat in it. Others just wanted to have access to kind of be near it, etc., or fish. And then three places really for the community to come together in a variety of different ways. So that balance of those three things, I think you'll see over and over again in the design. And then a lot of the values expressed were about this idea of fostering an environment that is inclusive and welcoming to all, providing opportunities for economic growth and for wealth building, as well as promoting sustainability and access to nature and recreation, and integrating history and art. This image really just shows those now, sorry, if you can just go back one, those four things. So water access, community, nature and green spaces, and economic development opportunities. So Mordecai and Andriana and India did share their salon series with us, which was really amazing. And we just wanted to echo that sort of having these deeper conversations have really inspired and informed the work that we're about to show you. And one of the things that came up in the whole history conversation, especially, and came up again for those of you that attended on Friday night when Cynthia spoke, was this idea about Indigenous tribes' relationship to the lake, and the lake itself as a sacred source and something spiritual that was a center for cultural gathering and sharing, and how, you know, through design, but also through our relationship with the lake, we can sort of begin to have this similar notion of reciprocity. I think also one of the things that came out of that was really this question and a sort of deepness about, in order for the future of the lakefront to be a space of healing, there's a lot of work to do to get there, right? That it has to acknowledge and remedy the past harms and also really elevate and integrate, especially BIPOC voices and needs. So this is why this work is so important, because it has to actually materialize into the work itself. And as Mordecai mentioned, these were some of the ongoing, continuing, implications that they're just beginning. It's a snapshot, of course, of these conversations, but I think all of these things have emerged and will continue to guide the work and the development of the design in the future, even post the visioning and the master plan itself. So for some of you who this isn't the first presentation, we also wanted to not only reference some of the work that we've done previously, but also to ground it in some of the sort of design principles and inspirations, because this really is an iterative body of work. So there's been a number of design inspirations that have informed our thinking. The first of which was this idea of varying the shoreline. So really creating a dynamic and diverse set of experiences along the water's edge, with opportunities to embrace the water in multiple different ways. And this is also about supporting the ecological health of the lake itself. So seeing the lake as one of the stakeholders. The next slide is one that Allison showed earlier, but also is really foundational and grounding of the master plan, this notion of whole history and this process of exploring and telling and collecting personal stories and finding ways to integrate them into the design. This is something that, we're highlighting as a value and a vision. And then over time, the goal is that we actually take these stories, and some of them might be creating similar experiences of people who sort of, fishing as a child and the sort of desire to want to do that again, but also to spark new opportunities for storytelling within the design, as well as strengthening of the connections really to the lake. Building off of Third Space Action Lab's Salon series and the one that they had specifically on the porch, this idea of sort of Cleveland porch culture, as well as how the porch idea can really foster a sense of belonging, but also provide intimate, casual, and informal experiences and really showcase individuality and diversity on the lakefront. And then finally, this notion of flow lines. And what we mean by that is that the site has really been influenced by various movements over time, from the indigenous lakefront trails to the Underground Railroad. All of these things leave both a physical and a psychological mark on the site. And so these flows have really inspired our design vocabulary, but also there is a desire to kind of create new flows and new connections to the lake. So these were really our first sketches, and you can kind of see how those concepts and flows shaped the site. So this was an idea of an organizational framework that really, was varying the edge, was embracing the city and the lake and kind of creating this connection between the two. So it wasn't one directional, but back and forth, as well as this idea of really a lakefront for all and finding sort of experiences and spaces to experience joy through nature, through play, through economic opportunity, and through gathering. So we are now going to sort of go through this. This is the first 3 slides are a quick kind of way to help to elevate some of the key changes since the 30% master plan. Of course, the focus of the master plan is really this about 22-acre site north of the Brown Stadium. This is an image of the existing condition, which hopefully sparks the great opportunity that exists today, because it is all parking lots today. Next, and I think Cricket, if you kind of can toggle between the 30 and the 60%, I can call out some of the key changes. So we last shared the work in July and August, which is actually only about 2.5 months ago. But we've really been refining the plan with a number of key changes. And some of those are the latest Shoreway Boulevard alignment and the thinking from the connector team that Joyce explained is doing the engineering of the land bridge and the reimagining of the Shoreway. That's incorporated into the plan. There is a multimodal hub that has been rescaled based on precedents that we received from RTA and Amtrak, and as well as it's also based on the 2018 Cleveland Lakefront Multimodal Transit Facility study. So that's grown. It's a lot bigger, but it also shows that ability to have potentially RTA, Amtrak, and bus together, which we think, again, is a really great way to bring better public transit right here to the lakefront. There's been a series of strengthened connections from the land bridge, especially east to the Rock Hall and the Great Lakes Science Center. There was a lot of insight in terms of the connector not only being north-south, but how it connects east-west, of course, to the stadium and the potential renovation, as well as east. The entire beachfront has really been reconfigured. So there's now a new sort of beach and wetlands area, and this was really done to both increase safety, but also ecological impact. The beach is now perched, so it's sort of high and the sand doesn't descend directly into the water, but it's buffered by wetlands and a riprap edge, ensuring there is an active navigation channel, but also allowing for kind of to be more immersed in a natural shoreline. The development areas have been further articulated. Again, they still are just massing, so don't see them as a particular design of a building. But we also did deeper work to sort of show a new boutique hotel, which is connected to the connector, as well as a food hall, which was in response to feedback around providing affordable lakeside dining. And then, of course, there's been some ongoing conversations with the port to ensure that, we coordinate with their needs for the cruise ship operations and servicing directly to the west. So the next image here is a plan view, which I know is sometimes not the easiest for people to read. So we can sort of skip ahead to the sort of aerial overviews, which I think are a little bit easier to understand, but we can always go back to that in the Q&A. But there are two primary axes. You can kind of see the curved land bridge connecting downtown to the lake, as well as this diagonal urban promenade that sort of goes all the way, ending at a fishing pier and reaches back to the city right at the moment where the Rock Hall's expansion's new community park sort of comes in, creating yet another connection back to downtown. And then there's three sort of general pockets or kind of areas of activity. On the east side, there is activities related primarily to play and recreation, including a large nature play area, sports courts, a cookout area, and a sun deck to the east. There is the kind of larger scoop in the center of the site that really is about nature and water access and different ways to engage the water's edge with the beach and the porches and the wetlands on the shoreline. The integrated development directly north of the stadium. And then there's also places really for community gathering. And this includes the large community plaza for festivals and events in the center, where the land bridge sort of descends and touches down, as well as a large flexible sloped lawn with views of the working waterfront and the port on the west side. And the next, I think you can go to the one image later, where you see the little tags. This is a different view where you can sort of see the urban promenade lined with lively ground floor uses, extending out to the lake and ending in the fishing pier. Integrated development, which is really designed to resemble a kind of village-like neighborhood with lots of openings and gardens and active ground floor uses. You can see here the naturalized shoreline, which has been reconfigured. And in the distance, there's also a kind of 20-year vision for potential future transit-oriented development in just a portion of the Muni lots. And this is another angle that we actually think is really helpful to sort of understand and see the way that the lakefront is really embracing and tying back to the city. And the goal here is that, of course, the new land bridge is a strong, connection that goes over, But it's not just about the land bridge and the connection to the malls, but there's really an idea about strengthened connections at East 9th, at West 3rd, the diagonal promenade that sort of goes through the site and connects back, through right between the Great Lakes Science Center and the Rock Hall, as well as sort of all of the kind of varied esplanades and ways to engage the shore itself. This is a view from the water, and you can kind of see for any boaters out there, that this is a really sort of impressive kind of moment where you sort of get to see the expanse and the panorama of the downtown and the city. But it also really shows the layering of the site and how the elevation changes and the topography really creates this varied shoreline with a series of really sheltered and intimate and protected spaces. And that approach allows us to do a lot of different things. It does provide that kind of intimacy of experiences. It breaks down the overall scale so that it doesn't just feel like one monumental gesture. It provides a buffer really between the development and the public space, which helps to prevent the lakefront from ever feeling or being privatized. And it also really, with topography and planting, allows us to help increase comfort and really to even serve as a type of windbreak during the colder seasons. We all know it can get extremely brutal on the lakefront in the wintertime. So the connector is not just a north-south connector, but also one that connects east-west. Go to the next slide. You can see just some of these sort of flow lines that we're working to integrate. So of course, there is the connection to the lake from the malls, but also a connection to public transit. That is the multimodal hub. Again, it's just a massing. It's not meant to be a design. There is the potential stadium renovation connection. And then of course, the connection we were talking about, the sort of new connection to the Rock Hall and the Great Lakes Science Center. And we do think actually that the multimodal transit hub is a really great opportunity for an iconic, inviting, and a civic building. So that could be a great moment. It's highly visible, of course, not only from the land bridge, but also if you're traveling via train or on the shoreway itself. This is a view from the land bridge. So once you've crossed over the railroad, this is the connection going back to the Great Lakes Science Center and the Rock Hall. The next image shows at the end of the land bridge. So here you're looking back towards the downtown skyline. And this is really the landing moment. It provides this incredible spot to kind of take in the sunset with a series of overlooks and seating steps and gentle slopes that really create a sense of drama, kind of excitement as you enter into the space of the lake. There's also a moment here. There's a little overlook at the top, and that also has potentially a kiosk and an elevator, a sort of shortcut to get you down to the play space below. This is a view from the top of the land bridge looking east over the family-friendly area. Here you're looking at the nature playground. The sports courts and Cookout Grove are just off the image. There's also opportunity for more community-focused amenities underneath the land bridge here, including public restrooms, as well as the elevator, as well as other kind of community spaces. And we talked about this the last time, but we captured this view in order to show really that, from that elevated position, all of these things are also kind of on display from the land bridge above. And then touching on the ground, this is the nature playground and sports courts, which again, were intentionally sited to have a direct relationship to the Rock Hall and the Great Lakes Science Center, leveraging their mission and focus on education and all of the school buses and kids who sort of come there on a regular basis. And that experience also in the winter, we have been looking at lots of different ways to activate and sort of make the lakefront attractive, year round. a view of the central community plaza oriented towards the sunset. You can see the porches and the water play in the distance. Even the boutique hotel massing has been designed to ensure that this view is open. And the transformation potential of that in the winter, it's currently been sized in order to fit a hockey ice rink, which we have heard is a really unique feature, because there aren't other open public spaces that we're aware of that can fit that. This is an image at the east edge of the sun deck area, and we had a number of conversations with the boating community here and their desire to kind of have moments to tie up. So you can see here the opportunity to have cleats and other things to allow for that activity to happen. And this is at the center, the perched beach, which just means it's sort of sitting up high with a series of ledges and the wetlands. And there is a kind of more shallow area for people to engage with the water that's separated by an earthen sort of lip or berm from the wetlands. And we think this is a really distinctive edge that not only creates a more naturalized and healthy shoreline, really in the context of the urban center, but one where you can sort of be immersed in the wetlands and also provides a really great educational opportunity. And the next image just shows that experience of sort of being on the edge with the lake to the one side, the wetlands to the other. And again, I think showing the sort of idea of the healing that also happens ecologically in terms of water quality and habitat along the edge. The concept of the porches is one of the things that I think resonated really strongly with a lot of people and was one of our sort of favorite design elements. The concept is really for a series of highly distinctive porches, and each is supposed to have its own individuality and personality and sort of flair. And they're all envisioned really as intimate spaces with different materials and styles. So together, sort of aggregated all together, they create the idea of the porches, but individually, they're really meant to be these kind of cozy moments for families and small groups. We also do see these as a really incredible opportunity to integrate the whole history. So all of the stories, this could be the naming of the porches, the sort of design of the porches. There's also been a lot of enthusiasm around these being an opportunity to collaborate with artists. And this is a view from inside one of those porches looking out towards the lake and the wetlands. And again, there is a desire that these sort of transform in the winter time to become a series of warming huts along the lakefront. Finally, this is a view out. You're at the end of the fishing pier looking back, and you can kind of see this diagonal line that sort of cuts through and invites you all the way back to the city. And the lawn has actually been sloped so that it can accommodate sledding in the wintertime. And then finally, we did want to end with sort of talking a little bit about some of the economic development opportunities, because we recognize, and I hope all of you do too, that this is a long-term project that of course will be phased over time. You can go to the next slide. With really a series of opportunities for economic development. And by that, I mean the sort of vertical actual building development. So some of the preliminary phasing has really considered a first phase to really be starting at the lakefront. So where you see in red, to really provide a critical mass and kind of energy and momentum, helping to really activate and energize the lakefront. The second phase we sort of think could be the introduction of the multimodal transit hub, which you're seeing in purple here, and then future phases, which we're seeing in blue, building off of that energy around the transit hub and, including transit-oriented development right adjacent to it. And then there's a longer term, 20+ year vision that considers development of a portion of the Muni lots. Currently, that whole yellow area is the Muni lots that with the reimagined sort of boulevard unlocks that potential. We are sort of thinking about concentrating any development really in the deeper orange in the middle around the intersections of that new shoreway design. But that still allows for kind of ample room. If you go to the next slide, I think where you see it in plan, you can see the parking lots that still exist there today and could in the future, you know, to sort of keep to that tradition, we know very, very strong tradition of tailgating in the meeting lots that exist today. And then in terms of the development, we're starting to sort of think through a series of principles, kind of guiding principles, as well as recommendations for the development. Again, this isn't a design, but rather massing ideas. But the notion is that it would be integrated with public access, active ground floors, community sort of amenities, as well as garden walks that really connect the lakefront and ensure that it doesn't feel privatized. There is an idea for a boutique hotel, which could be integrated into the land bridge with the lobby sort of wrapping underneath, alongside community-focused programs on the underside with restrooms, the elevator, et cetera, so that this kind of helps to activate the underside. And this is a view sort of from that underside, the portal that actually the sort of welcoming entrance from the east to the lakefront. We are showing here just as a concept idea, sort of public art that could be integrated on the underside of the land bridge here. We're specifically showing a map here with Indigenous trails and landmarks. Ideally, this could be a place working with an Indigenous artist to, again, not only sort of, you know, showcase that sort of part of the story, and that, you know, to reminder that we are on native land, but also the fact that as you enter in, that's kind of this threshold or this place to kind of, again, you know, have a certain sort of respect for the lake. There is an idea of a food hall here. So you're seeing the boutique hotel to the left, and this is an initial sketch or concept for a food hall that really could showcase really varied, affordable, and local fare. We're calling it Taste of Cleveland type of an idea or concept. And this is right at the entrance of that urban promenade or spine. So here you're on the other side, the city side, you can see the Taste of Cleveland food hall to the right of the image, and at the end is the fishing pier. And the idea is that, you know, this too, the sort of lakefront can also be a place for new traditions and to help enhance the game day experience that exists today. So all of this is also being sort of with that in mind, that as it being a place for everyone, it's the place for the everyday as well as for some of the events, including the Browns games. And I think we just wanted to end with a kind of aerial overview, which we can leave on as we sort of move into the Q&A portion, just to give that larger image of the lakefront and where we are today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. And we have a couple of people who've raised their hands, and Allison will get to you in just a minute. And my gosh, we've had phenomenal questions and comments in the chat box. So we're going to get to those really fast, but I want to do 2 quick poll questions first. So Mitch is going to pull up a question. And as you heard, things have changed from what was seen 2 months ago, and there's still room for things to change from what you're seeing today. So the question is, select any elements of this draft plan that concern you or require more attention, and explain in the chat. So the options are, do you have any concerns about access to nature and places to play, places for viewing, exploration, and relaxation, water activities and access, places for community events and gatherings, development opportunities, or I have no concerns? So I'm just going to count backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2.
Oh, Marie,
Yes.
sorry. We have 2 questions open at the same time, so the second question is also open right now.
Okay, that's might be a little bit hard to see. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down so I can see the second question. The master plan is a long-term vision that will require phases of construction over time. What do you want to see built on the lakefront first? The land bridge, nature play, sports courts, and water features, the beach, porches, wetlands, and water access, the lawn and garden walks, the community plaza and walkway to and along the lakefront, or other. And if you hit other, just let us know in the chat. So now I'm going to count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now Mitch, show us the results. So, all right, there on your concerns or areas that you really want to make sure have more attention. Really, it's split between all of the options. So after this meeting today, we'll dive into that. And if you could explain yourself in the chat, that will help us dig deeper into what your thoughts are. For the second question, you wanted to see really the land bridge built first. And that really will spur all this other activity. So that makes a lot of sense. And then it was nice to see some other emphasis, particularly on the community plaza and walkway and so forth. So with that, we'll stop sharing and I'm going to turn it back over to Allison because I know you have a lot of great questions.
Yes, we have so many great questions and comments in the chat. Keep them coming. And if we don't get to answer all of your questions to your satisfaction in the time that we have remaining, I think a lot of these will be answered through FAQs on our website. And you can continue to reach out to us and we communicate back with those that leave comments for us on clevelandnorthcoast.com. So I'm going to start at the top and just kind of go in chronological order here. And, I think some of these, Joyce, are probably better for the city to answer. And then, Lisa and your team, some more design oriented questions. So the first, is there a possibility of partnership with the Cavs to create outdoor themed basketball courts? And there was a link in the chat to a series of courts in Brazil that was done in conjunction with the Cavs and the NBA.
I noted this in the chat. This is Joyce Wong from the city. That is an interesting idea for a partnership that we'll take in and as feedback. We definitely want to have basketball courts and sports courts as shown to be a place for people to recreate. Thank you.
Great. We had a reference to Waterfront Toronto. I think this came earlier in the presentation. So maybe you saw that Sugar Beach and that Perched Beach example, I think has had a lot of influence on how this design has changed since the 30 to 60%. So a suggestion here to integrate recreational space into the working waterfront as well in that same comment. Any reaction, Lisa, from the team? Waterfront Toronto as a specifically Sugar Beach.
Yeah, we actually did look at Sugar Beach. I think it's one of the, more recent kind of these perched beach conditions and urban areas that have been really successful. And of course, Toronto has a similar cold climate as Cleveland. So it's actually a really great precedent.
Yeah, great. We just had a recent comment here that asked about sand volleyball courts as part of those sports courts.
That could be on the beach too. You never know.
There you go. There you go. Okay.
I also want to mention that there are sand volleyball courts on the existing
Voinovich.
beach. So, we probably would not duplicate it, but it's something to consider. Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got a couple of questions here around the Browns Stadium. First one, will the upgrade include an enclosure? How much is the Browns working with this? What is their involvement in the plan? And then a comment around, with the exception of the limited game days and special events that are happening, what is the opportunity for people to interact and activate the stadium? A question here around restrooms and commercial spaces that could be liners around the building.
Thanks, Allison. I'd be happy to take that one. Again, this is Joyce Fong from the city. The Browns, as well as other stakeholders on the lakefront, all have been working collaboratively on this effort. And, what we know from the Haslam Sports Group is that they intend to build a comprehensive and integrated stadium, which would have hopefully active frontage onto the lakefront. And so we are awaiting their drawings, which hopefully will be released this fall. And when they do release those drawings, they'll be integrated into the planning effort here.
Right.
In terms of restrooms and other commercial access, I think that was part of the question. We
Yeah.
intend to have public restrooms, whether it's tucked under the land bridge or accessible at various intersections, at the multimodal station, and, you know, TBD in terms of the stadium. And as I mentioned, you know, the intent, as we understand from the Haslam Sports Group, is that they'll have an active edge that will be accessible outside of game days.
Great, thank you so much, Joyce. Another question for you. Could someone please address how this plan will be paid for? What can we do to make sure that something happens after this plan is created?
Thank you. Can I add on to my last comment?
Sure.
That I just want to clarify that it's a renovation, that the Haslam Sports Group has stated an intent to stay, and it's not going to be a new stadium. It's going to be a renovation. Moving on to your question about how to pay for it. Everyone's question. So it's a good one. And, you know, we're looking at many different tools. Part of this is, you know, we are going to go after some of the federal funding, which is available through the Infrastructure Jobs Act, the bipartisan IIJA. We intend to be competitive with regards to state money as well. And then locally, working towards you know, a strategy to ensure that there is a local match for those funds. And part of the strategy is this new waterfront redevelopment authority, which will then be able to receive other forms of funding. You know, there's also fundraising that can happen philanthropically, receiving grants from different sources, and the waterfront redevelopment authority will then carry forward the work of ensuring that this is built to, you know, to what we desire. Anything else from that question?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And again, if people want further clarity or want to ask additional follow-up questions, please put them in the chat. For those of you, I noticed that a couple of folks have their hands up. In this webinar style, only the hosts are unmuted. So please put your comments in the chat, questions and comments, and we'll get to them there. Okay, so Joyce, probably another one for you. What are elements of this built environment that contribute with the expressed desire by Cleveland for a 15-minute city, particularly for those who may be living or working in the North Coast? This was also a question about commercial and residential space and sort of what's the critical mass of population that we need for this to be successful.
That's great. Great question. So, you know, we did study through field operations and their subconsultant HRNA, the economic conditions for the lakefront, and using a lot of the available data that we know of market absorption for residential and commercial. All that to say, we know it's a very delicate balance. We don't want to, so to speak, cannibalize from the downtown core. We know that there's probably about 1,000 units of residential that can happen here at the lakefront, given that there are so many upcoming developments downtown and on the riverfront. And the purpose of the commercial here really is to support activity on the lakefront rather than grabbing too much from the downtown core. I did want to note that the walk across the land bridge itself is actually a 5-minute walk. So greatly reduced from what it currently is now, which is likely more like 20 minutes. And so, you know, by activating the public realm, our goal is to create a 15-minute city by having that connection closer to downtown and also to the lakefront.
Yeah. I think a question here in a similar vein, can you support the Taste of Cleveland food hall that's proposed without negatively impacting the West Side market?
A great question. I think the idea is that this would, again, support the activity of the lakefront and build new audiences for small businesses who may not necessarily currently have an audience at the West Side market.
Yeah, great. So there was a question here about the village. So Lisa, maybe you want to expand upon that. Also a comment that says the amphitheater is great, as is the small outdoor seating built onto the hillside.
Sure. I mean, I think the idea of the village as a name is just something that evokes more integrated development. And also at a scale that feels, you know, different. It's not meant to be these big, there of course is the Burke Airport flyway restriction, et cetera, but it's kind of mid-rise, I would say, to low-rise. So that's part of that idea, and that it really does feel integrated, and so it doesn't feel like it's just, you know, sort of plopped on in the corner, but that it actually has a you know, a set of really design principles around it in terms of ensuring that it has active ground floors, that it is publicly accessible, et cetera, but that there also is a separation, and you can kind of see a kind of buffering using planting and other types of topography and things to ensure that, you know, for that community, there is a little bit of privacy, as well as for the public, it doesn't feel like it's sort of their front lawn.
Yeah, great. So I've got about a dozen more questions and we have about 12 minutes. So let's see if we can get through them here. A comment that says, I love the adjacency of the play area to the Great Lakes Science Center. A question about the bridge. It seems like a long walk from the mall to the end of the bridge. Are there things that can be considered to activate the length of the land bridge?
Yeah, I mean, as Joyce said, you know, it actually is not that long. It's about a 5-minute walk. I think it takes what is a really long experience now and really does compress it. Part of the design around it actually being an arc is about that it is experiential. So as you walk, your sort of scenery is constantly evolving and changing. I think, Cricket, maybe if you can go to one of the aerial views that shows that a little bit, because here it's kind of on the backside. You know, there is opportunity. I think it's about 120 feet wide in its current design. And so there is opportunity to integrate planting, potentially even a small scale kiosks or other things, you know, that this was meant to be to kind of think about the shape, how it connects both north, south, and east, west. But, you know, that design will continue to sort of grow in the next phases.
Yeah. So there may be a similar or question that builds off of that. A question around ADA accessibility for those who are physically challenged. How would they access the site?
So all of the connections that we talked about strengthening are all ADA compliant, even the land bridge itself. I don't know. Yeah, Cricket, thank you for showing that with your cursor to show those gentle ramps that go down. Those are all being designed so they're less than 5% slopes. But as we mentioned at the tip of the overlook, there's also meant to be an integrated elevator. So if you did not want to do the sort of slower, more gentle scoop down, you could actually get onto the elevator. At that moment, you can see that little red kind of piece there. All the other connections are meant to be, you know, stronger, friendlier, allowing for not only ADA access, but also improving, you know, bike, etc. If you were coming via transit, there's also, at that point, it connects to the land bridge as well as elevators within that building. And then as Joyce mentioned, we'll sort of see how the Browns renovation sort of happens. There may be opportunities along that edge as well.
Yeah, great. I'm going to try to group these questions together. So there's a large stormwater discharge that enters the lake near the location that's currently shown as a beach. We're very well aware. How is that going to work? And then also talk about resiliency in an era of climate change. You know, what about storms? What about flooding? What can we talk about there?
Sure. Cricket, do you want to talk about the stormwater outflow there and the current thinking in your conversations you've had?
Sure. But what we've been looking at with that particular stormwater outflow is that it's actually through previous projects, the amount of sewer discharge has been really reduced. It basically only has a stormwater event on average 2 times a year. So that said, it still does handle a lot of just general stormwater conditions aside from sewer capacity. So we've been looking at a few ways to reroute that particular pipe, and it doesn't seem relative to other stormwater outflows, which can be pretty gnarly. This one seems pretty tame. So we're looking at options whether to align it under the fishing pier and the promenade or out to the northwest corner as well. But in the master plan, we're proposing to relocate that. And then general stormwater, we've been working with MKA, our civil engineers, and our goal is to reduce the amount that we connect back into the city system wherever we can. So any garden space you see here likely will be play some role in stormwater detention. Luckily, we're all on fill, so we're able to do a lot of subterranean work on that front as well.
Yeah, and I think the larger question about resiliency, I think, you know, currently this is one large 22 acres of asphalt parking lot. Everything that we're doing here in terms of introducing, you know, permeability, the wetlands, you know, new sort of native gardens, et cetera, are all kind of meant to work with that. This is a freshwater wetland, but wetlands in and of themselves, you know, they sort of like are actually resilient in that they rise and sort of go up and down basically with water levels. And so the idea is that too over time can kind of help. There is an additional breakwater that's on the outer edge of the wetlands. I should just note that the current edge of the site is actually, we're sort of holding that edge. Everything that we're doing is inboard of that edge. So yeah, you can see that white line. The only thing that sort of peeks out of the existing edge is the fishing pier right now. So all of the things that we're doing with varying the shoreline and creating kind of larger ecological areas, as well as stormwater management, are all sort of being looked at with both the overall health of the lake, as well as a larger goal of, you know, resiliency and biodiversity.
We have a question and a comment about wind. This has come up a couple of times. When you talk about windbreak and just, you know, we're obviously trying to create this as a place that is 4 seasons. You know, how are we sort of grappling with being right on Lake Erie?
Well, I think the sort of dynamic shaping of the lakefront, you know, is part of that. So we're creating these series of layers of moving in and out and kind of shaping different places where people are, that's surrounded and buffered by planting that are very particular in terms of their orientation. All of these things are kind of, you know, different tactics in the physical sort of making of the place that help to kind of create these buffers and windbreaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 2 recommendations here to highlight Cleveland's industrial history. One with reference to the porch construction, saying that would be really great to use some of those industrial materials to actually construct them. Made reference to the Hilton downtown as a good example inside of their lobby. And then also a comment here about the Hewletts that are currently housed at the Port of Cleveland. And then just some positive comments about how this really needs to happen. So thank you for that support. Because we're short on time, I'm gonna leave that as a statement and say that yes, we definitely have heard that industrial history, the sort of maritime history of Cleveland, should be part of that whole history that's represented on the site. Question about Burke. How is it related to the plan?
Great question. I'll take that one. This is Joyce from the city again. So we are studying the economic impact of the potential closure of Burke right now. That study will end in December 2023. So we'll know more by the end of this year. And we see Burke, you know, potentially as a further study, yeah. TBD.
And this might be another question for you, Joyce, around safety planning. Specifically, we had some questions here around lighting, and then a recommendation for underneath the walkways, the elevated walkways, and just sort of lighting throughout. We need it to look attractive, but it also needs to be safe.
Thank you, Allison. And I think that's great feedback, and we'll look closer at lighting as we go deeper into the design documentation. Well, I will say one thing about safety is that people define safety differently, depending on how you identify, what community you're from. You know, sometimes people feel more safe when there's more police presence. Sometimes people feel less safe when there's more police presence. And so we understand there's a delicate balance of that. What we do know is we want people to feel safe without over policing it. And so that could look like different things. It could be, you know, perhaps an expansion of clean and safe ambassadors down to the lakefront. It could be other elements to help provide sort of safety through the built environment, such as lighting. And we just understand that's a delicate balance that we're going to have to work through programmatically.
Yeah. And then 2 infrastructure questions here. Does this plan preserve the RTA light rail or the waterfront line east of East 9th Street? And then what happens to the shoreway? Is it staying the same? Is it becoming a boulevard? Is it being eliminated?
Great. So I'll take the shoreway question first. We are studying those two options, which is keep the shoreway as is or remove the shoreway and build a more urban style boulevard. The good news is that this land bridge configuration can happen regardless of which option we select. But we do believe if we go with the route of the boulevard, it will actually create a stronger human experience and remove some of those big infrastructure barriers, including a giant ramp going across West 3rd there. As well as new opportunities for development. You can't have addresses, so to speak, with a highway. And then the other question was around
The waterfront line.
Waterfront line. Yes, we are enthusiastically collaborating with GCRTA. And you know, the idea here is with the multimodal station is that the West 3rd and East 9th stations would consolidate into one, located at the multimodal station along with Amtrak and potentially other multimodal users. The waterfront line does extend currently to East 18th Street, which is where the Muni lot, you know, potential development is shown. And we see that as an opportunity for transit-oriented development and utilizing that station much more than it is now. So we want to support multimodal transportation.
Great. And then one last question. We know it had to have come up about parking.
I was literally just going to say, I can't believe that we had an entire meeting without it coming up. Allison, I feel like you can speak to this too, of course. But so currently there is an existing parking lot at the Great Lakes Science Center that is about 500 spaces. This shows that actually being able to grow to about 875 spaces. So there's an expanded lot underneath the land bridge. And in addition, because now the land bridge is that sort of 5-minute walk from many of the other downtown you know, parking garages, the idea is that those now become much better positioned and closer and opens up a much kind of larger, you know, capacity, which currently I think the capacity around those is I don't know if you actually have those numbers or they're being grasped, but we know that it's fairly low, especially on the weekends, and we feel like a lot of people will be wanting to come down to the lakefront.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we're just about at time. I think there was one other question with some of the media folks on our call. Thank you again for joining us both on Friday and today. It sounds like Murphy Epson is getting you that press kit. The press secretary over at the city, Marie Zickafuss, also has that and is ready for you all to reach out. Joyce, we'll turn it over to you for the last word on this right at the 1 o'clock hour. And thank you so much again for joining.
If I could actually take 30 seconds to share my lakefront stories, I would love to. So, you know, one of the things that really inspired me was I was with a group of board members from a national Asian American Pacific Islander group that came to visit from all across the US, including some of the Pacific Islands. And we were together for more than a day. And I gave them the option on our tour of Cleveland. Do you want to go, you know, over to this, or do you want to go over to the lakefront? Everyone wanted to go to the lakefront. And one of the colleagues who, again, is from one of the Pacific Islands, she stepped into the water at Edgewater Beach and she said, I'm finally connected. And I just feel like that is the type of connection and relationship that has inspired me around our relationship with Lake Erie and how connected we can be to one another. And that the water is more than just a symbol of an asset, but it's really our stakeholder, our great relationship with the lake. So I do want to share just a few things as we close out. Again, thank you for spending your time with us over the past 90 minutes, listening and taking it all in. You know, we will have many opportunities to engage. We'll be out at almost every Dave's Markets in the city of Cleveland over the next week and a half. I'll be there at Shaker Square on Saturday, and there will be a bunch of activities, including trunk or treats, Halloween activities, where we'll be engaging directly with community members. We'll also be engaging with several CMSD school districts, and any festivals and events that you can think of, you know, we would love to hear about so that we can send folks out to gather feedback. One last thing, which is, I think there was a slide from one of our partners. Allison, would you still like me to show that slide?
If Mitch could bring it back up. Yes, about Cheers. There we go.
Great. So our partners, we are also a partner on this project along with Cleveland City Council on the Cleveland Harbor Eastern Embayment Resiliency Strategy, and this is moving into the design phase between the areas of East 55th Street and the Nature Preserve on the lakefront. There are open house and walk shops coming up in December. So December 2nd is when there will be the next phase of this. And again, this is speaking to resiliency, another opportunity to really create and soften our edge, which currently has a lot of wave action and is really kind of a risk for the communities over there in St. Clair, Superior, and Glenville. So we hope to continue to build out our waterfronts, and this is another opportunity for you to engage. Thank you. So that's all, folks. Thank you so much for your time, and feel free to send feedback, hit up the webpage, and send us any questions or comments that you have. Thank you.